What about my child's gift for athletics? Let's say that's probably something that comes up a lot. Or for, let's say, performing or acting or singing. I have known young people. When I was growing up, I knew somebody who appeared on Broadway. Um, and I lived in Philadelphia. He had to go there on weekends and the matinees. And how do you deal with the fact that your child is unlikely to become Megan Rapinoe, who's like a star soccer player, or Charlize Theron? Some people visualize that as like, well, you're preparing your child for failure. They're going to be a star in high school, and that's just never going to translate. They're not going to become a star soccer player just because they're maybe an all-state soccer player in your school or basketball or football player. It's almost ridiculous, although some people do become pros and they have to be encouraged and supported. But how do you make sure that they transition into becoming a normal person? And the way I frame the question, I believe you work with children in the same way, is how do they learn to make successful efforts in life? And if they've had extreme success in one area, that's a skill. That's a manifestation of a skill, both a skill at whatever they were doing, singing or drama or athletics, but it's also a meta skill. They're also learning how to work at something in a successful way. So I have 3 kids. I'm not presenting myself as a perfect parent. My kids wouldn't let me do that. However, they all have, I make this bad joke all the time. None of them has been institutionalized. And as I say, you and I, we know people whose children haven't had that good fortune.
Right.
They've been in rehab, and in some sad cases, they've died. So, to put on my resume as a parent, oh, none of my children have been institutionalized for addiction or mental illness, seems like I'm shooting kind of low, but it's an alternative that you and I are aware of. And again, I can't build my career off my children, but my oldest son is a chief software engineer for a company everybody knows the name of. My elder daughter, has just gone to do her internship in a counseling program out of Tulane as part of her PhD program. And my youngest daughter, who's quite a bit younger than the others, was a former arts editor for both Esquire and GQ magazine, and now she's freelancing. And all 3 of them, they weren't superstars in high school, but all 3 of them had some successes in high school. My son, Dana, won the state fencing championship. My daughter, Haley, was an excellent diver. And my daughter, Anna, was both a good soccer goalie at one point, but then another better soccer goalie came along. And I have to give my wife a lot of credit there. We knew a family whose daughter had been a national quality gymnastics star. And in her freshman year in college, she injured her knee. And she has an injured knee for the rest of her life. And B, she went to college as a gymnastics star, and that's not going to happen. And something sort of parallel happened to my son. He was a state champion fencer, but he dislocated his shoulder as a freshman at Penn, and he stopped fencing. Haley didn't continue with diving, and Anna was both, athlete, but she was also a star in student productions. But Anna wasn't going to become a star actress. That wasn't that wasn't going to happen. None of them continued in those activities, but I think they've all leveraged those experiences into successful adult roles. All of them knows what it means to work on something, to develop your skill, to perform, to be out in public, and to, do well, to be able to meet a challenge, to accept somebody asking you to do something, to meet those requirements. I'll just remember with my daughter, Anna, she started doing forensic comic readings, and she won some, I don't know, medals or competitions that way. And then I said to her, but I didn't think you were in forensics club. And she said, I'm not. And I said, don't they make you do that before they let you perform? He said, well, they didn't have anybody in the comic acting department. And so I asked and they let me. And then I said, was that a little, challenging? And she said, Dad, I've never been more nervous in my life. That was the end of the discussion. I mean, I stopped it. She didn't have to go into her, but she overcame her nerves and she performed well. And there's a lot of life that's like that. If you're going to try to be exceptional, successful adult, you're going to be in performance situations. And we're people who deal with addiction issues. We're people, you deal with youth, and you see people that crumble under that kind of pressure where they're asked to perform in a situation, a normal school setting, and they don't feel they can.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about people in sports who kind of meet a challenge and they fall apart at times. People are discussing that lately about Tiger Woods. Has that in the past happened to him? And being able to meet a challenge, feel capable of dealing with it without resorting to whatever dysfunctional behavior, in particular addictive behaviors, specifically drugs and alcohol, is really a critical thing that people need to deal with. And if I were to describe what happened with my three children, I would say this: they didn't decide, well, I'm a championship, fencer. And Haley didn't decide, well, I'm a great diver. Anna may have had some fantasies about becoming a great actress. I'll leave that part aside. But what they learned the meta lesson. They learned the dynamics of successful effort, cooperation, making use of their talent. Don't go too high or go too low. They learn. I mean, all of them are remarkably persistent. And I know, well, that's a term you're familiar with because one of your favorite books is Grit. What determines success is people's ability to deal continuing effort in something. So at one point, Anna, when she graduated college, NYU, she knew what she wanted to do, and it took a while. She had to hang out for a while. And I actually suggested, I said, well, people in New York, they get jobs, as waitresses. And she had worked, in retail, selling things. And she said, Dad, I have to concentrate on getting a job, with a good publication. That's a job. And then she got a job with Esquire. She was one of 3 interns. And the other, Esquire is a men's magazine. The other 2 interns were men. They were only going to give a job to one of them. And Anna went into her boss and said they should give the job to her. And they did. So at that point in life, I said, I spent a few bucks sending Anna to NYU. At that point, I said, Anna, we're even. I sent you to NYU. well, so you get a job, somewhere like Esquire or whatever, and you've done it. So, our deal's done. You're on your own now. Do the best you can. Well, you owe me a few bucks, but okay. For that co-op I bought you in the village. But we're good. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say, when you're 40 or 50, oh, I made your success. And none of my children, if they were they would say something like, well, of course we were privileged. I mean, and our parents, they gave us a home and they put us all through college. They all went to college. But none of them would say, oh, our parents gave us the skills, or they were the ones. And Mara, what's her last name? Wilson? She doesn't claim that her father, she doesn't say, well, my father made me what I am today. And none of my children would say that. And they're right. I didn't. They did it. And it's the self-efficacy link that they've made the connection between the dotted lines on their own.
There's a couple threads I feel like.
What it takes to emerge from some success, possible stardom as a child, to being a successful functioning adult, which is the same in your case. You more often deal with children who aren't being successful, but we have that same goal of them emerging as successful adults.
There are a few threads I feel like you left open for me, and I can't decide. I've got to choose one, but I can't decide which I want to go down. You talked about the aspect of learning is more than just someone's engagement in a thing. It's more than just you're really successful at something. It's what you learn along the way. You're learning how to learn. You're learning about how to take in those experiences. If you have a good teacher, or if you're really mindful about those things. So you might be a star athlete, and you might even be so achievement oriented in that regard that you feel like, well, I need to go to the NFL or whatever it is. But maybe you don't. And so you've got to be prepared for maybe you don't. And you don't prepare somebody by saying you'll never do it. You prepare somebody by saying, well, you're really talented in this way. How do you apply that in other ways? Or what was it like when you tried out and you didn't make it? Or, how do you react to, it's the things along the way that make the experience worthwhile. And I guess that's the difference between someone like
meta learning, the emotional lessons you learn,
right,
including dealing with failure. Dana won the state championship against a kid from some high school in Princeton who he had lost to during the year. But in the state championships, he beat the kid. And just like when I said to Anna, when she got that job, I said, we're done. We're okay.
Yeah.
Dana he's still only in high school. When he won the state championship from a kid who had beat him earlier, he said, Dana, you're going to be okay. That's the way to do it, And
you mentioned that one of my favorite books that is true is Grit. And it's because it's that, I love the simple title to describe a
4 letters.
Yeah, it's great. And it's a lot of people, I know people who have only read the title. They've admitted to me that when they're criticizing the book, they've only read the title. And what they got from just the title, or maybe hearing about it somewhere, was that it's a book about, well, why don't you just try harder? And of course, as you know, it's not a book about why don't you just try harder. It's a book about people tend to try their best at things, at least for some time. And where do you put that effort? And how can you use that effort how can you gear that effort towards a meaningful learning experience, or, something that's worth pursuing, even though you're going to fall sometimes. And I think that's a beautiful way of thinking about anything.
Perseverance is one of the key terms. Life goes up and down. Everybody knows, even the best athletes have had bad games and, bad seasons. It's how do you maintain, there's a famous study where they studied people's overall life success. And the single thing that predicted success, both longevity and happiness was purpose, which means, and they made a point, they said, it doesn't actually mean necessarily fulfilling your purpose. You don't necessarily win, you don't clean up the ocean.
Right.
Or maybe you don't become the greatest athlete or political figure, but you have that never-ending engagement where you're always involved in trying to do something meaningful to you and to the world, and you don't quit at it. Well, you don't quit at it for a lifetime. That's a potential gift. You could give your child the gift of a lifetime of contentment and engagement. There's no greater gift than that.
I'll bridge those together. So you talked about some of the work that I do with kids, and I work with a lot of kids who their skills are so glaringly obvious to me. And it's not maybe completely obvious how those skills will translate into something like a classroom if that's not a place that they're usually successful. But it's pretty obvious to me that they can. And I think that a lot of my students email me and call me and get in touch with me, and they've all said things like, well, you taught me that I could do this in a classroom. And I think to some extent they're missing the point, which is that no, I tell you that it's possible to apply the things that you're learning and the things you're in the areas that you're very skilled in to other areas where you're not generally as successful or haven't been previously.
They're not taking the success message.
Right.
They weren't necessarily stars already. It's the same occupation. How do you translate, in one case, maybe superstardom or a lot of success into a lesson that allows you to be successful? And you're looking at children who haven't maybe packaged their success yet, but you're helping them to coordinate it to make it into something that is a successful vehicle.
Right.
Which happened to you. I mean, you had a set of skills that weren't lauded early on, but it turned out were substantial.
That's true. That's two different things. One, you can have a set of skills that you can use it as ingredients to make something. But I have worked with people who are like the football star, say but when they'll freeze up when they're in a classroom and they're told that so they think that they have to put all their effort into football only, which is, you should do that because that's something that you succeed in. But they sort of think there's two different worlds. Like, I can only do football in football, and I can only do school in school, and I'm bad at one, I'm okay at the other. So when that ends, if no one helps them understand that there are things that you're learning along the way in that area of success. One of them is you probably take a beating and you don't even realize it sometimes because you're so focused on enjoying it. You could do that in other areas, And so as long as people can see that the world is one place, it's not like there's not a school part of the world and, a football field part of the world, and then they can make something of it, then it should be good to go. So I say, go ahead and let your child be a child star as long as you have the skills in order to let them see the world as a
They hire
playground.
People like you for professional sports where, a professional athlete, not counting, Brady, they're done in their 30s.
Yeah, yeah.
Tiger Woods, he went into his 40s too.
Yeah.
But that's a long haul, you know what I mean? You're a professional athlete in your 20s, maybe your 30s. They could hire somebody like you to say, the success you're experiencing is something that, you can carry on in other areas. It won't be the same. They're not going to write you up in the sports page. So do the football coaches know you at all, or have you got an identity for them?
I know all the coaches. Yeah. And we're good. I work with a lot of the students, and we have good rapport. Especially there's I'll shout out to him now. There's one of the lacrosse coaches. His name's Gar. He and I have worked with some of the same kids. I mean, he's this revered coach, and I think people think he's revered because he wins championships. I think people more appreciate him. You know, he's such an easy guy to get along with because he cares about the people that are on his team. So he's someone I get along with a lot. And
You're
yeah,
doing almost the same job a little bit.
yeah,
He's trying to make them all they can be, maybe in lacrosse. Maybe he's conscious of everything else as well, but you're thinking, well, how do you get from being the topic we've talked about? How do you get from being good at lacrosse to being, good with when you're not running around with a stick and a ball in your hand?
something about identifying yourself as a coach, I think, instead of a psychotherapist or something, helps you actually coach people the way that you're supposed to.
Well, you're a coach, and
Yeah,
he's a coach.
exactly.
You really identify with that topic, and you're a parent, so you said you've been reflecting on, the success formula from that standpoint. Have you had any further thoughts from coaching to parenting?
It's basically the same thing, except you love your kid. My reflection is that you got to be a parent and a person that builds a relationship with your kid in that sense, and that's simultaneously you need to be a coach for your kid, somebody who can just not give information or suggestions when they're not being asked, but who can be attuned enough to, or so I can be attuned enough to my child that to know when there's something that needs to be addressed and be able to have maybe the language or the wisdom to fill that void with something interesting enough that it sends them the right direction, but not to be an overbearing sort of a parent. And that's the balance I hope to strike.
We are returning to maybe Mara Wilson's father, where I said in section 2, people could say, what the hell's the matter with this guy? His 13-year-old daughter on her birthday is in Toronto giving interviews, and she stumbles, and she did 2 things, and you pointed this out. He told her, oh, that wasn't fair. You're a kid, come on. And 2, but there's something to learn about this here. People don't want to, see somebody that's getting paid good money stand up there and complain about how tough their life is. And so I think your gift in coaching and therapy and helping are the same kind of gifts to be pretty essential for a parent. You said them, you just describe them. You love your child, that's A. And then B, the people we know of who've had unfortunate outcomes, they love their children too. They did not love their children.
Right. But could you imagine if Wilson's father stopped at that first part of the conversation? I've had experiences like that already. So Hadley, my daughter, is she already knows how to walk up and down the stairs. She's 2, but we did some switching of gate. We took off gates that used to be there, and so we made the upstairs childproof. So now she can go from downstairs, and as long as she lets us know, she can say, "All right, I'm going to go to my room. Be right back." And we'll say, "Okay, see ya." And then she goes up and down. She's fallen a few times, and you just want to hold her and say, "All right, we'll put the gate back on." And this is something that Sam and I, even if Sam could just make sure the gate's there forever if she's not careful, but despite and this is minor, right? But despite my instinct to say, all right, how can we make this safer? I think that the safer, better, more, the better parenting thing to do is for me to say, reflect with her. She's 2, but you can still do some reflection. Ow, that hurt. Oh, I hope you go slower. And then let her do it again. She's not trying to fall down and hurt herself. And I think that applies to parenting in general. You just have to fight the temptation a little bit to want to hold on to a kid and not let them get in any more danger, because the danger's there and they maybe have already learned a lesson about it.
The difference, we've talked often about how deprivileged people face more difficult transitions in life.
Yeah.
If there is a standard difficulty that privileged people face, it's that they're over, they call it helicopter parenting, and they're overprotective. And it's allowing a child to fail and to make mistakes and to endure pain often or partly as a step in learning. And that's the theme of our ages. Well, I'm in a different era than you, of this modern age's parenting. And it's tricky, but on the other hand, it's remarkable how often people, recognize that they have to let their child go out, and try things and maybe fail and to do things on their own. I'm impressed that I do see parents do that. So you're practicing that as well as your child's practicing, climbing the steps. You'll probably master that before long.
Right.
And there'll be other challenges along the way.
I do it for myself too. Like, I'm not actually, I talk that, in ways that people hear a lot of. I record myself talking, and I actually kind of hate the sound of my own voice, but you got a
deep-throated voice. You could be a radio.
But it's actually not very comfortable for me to get in front of, to put myself on a camera, even if it was only a couple hundred people listening to something, much less if thousands of people are going to hear it. And it's something that I've failed at before. I've looked ridiculous. You're going over themes now, and I'm sort of making analogies in real time that I haven't really thought about before, and putting ideas together, and people are going to see me fumble with it. I don't mind that, really. And so I'm so well versed now in trying things and screwing them up that and it took me a while to get to the trajectory that we're talking about. But like you say, I've experienced adversity in life, and so I can easily remind myself.
We're not the first people to mention this. Nobody is successful who hasn't had, Bill Gates, and he's had failures, everybody who's had a remarkable achievement has had possibly even more failures than successes.
Mm-hmm.
It's the joke is, and it's not a joke. Being successful means learning how to deal with failure, or lack of absence of really good success, and sometimes for extended period of time. So I guess we could call this section, let your child fail as well as experience success. Let them go out and, stumble.
Excellent. Do you want to wrap it up in any way, or should I cut it right there?
We're gonna go into some current events and quick Q&A, but you can forewarn people about that, perhaps.
All right. So that was 3 parts. We're kind of talking about child development and the idea that, well, I guess the through line of everything that we just talked about today is that you can frame any sort of phenomenon, like being a child star or being someone who goes to rehab, as either a success or a failure in a generalizable way. It just doesn't really work out that way. There's something that goes into people's successes and or failures that is the real substance behind why someone lives an okay life or doesn't. And so when it comes to raising kids, we don't have to be so hyper concerned about, well, my kid wants to go into acting, but don't child stars like kill themselves or something? And you don't have to be so hyper focused as to say, my kid had a drug problem, and doesn't that mean I need to pony up and get an expensive rehab? There are basic elements of parenting, about life, about raising a human being that we're pretty much all aware of and privy to, that are actually the things that go into building a good life for them and for ourselves.